Morning, everybody. This is Tuesday morning's devotion. Hope you've had a good night rest and are ready to face the day. We've been looking at the name of God, Jehovah Rapha. We started yesterday talking about the God who heals, as is revealed in Exodus chapter 15. Don't you want to go and read again the beautiful story of the deliverance from Egypt and then sadly the grumbling of the people at the time? Now we're asking today the question, why do we hurt? Where does hurt originate from? Where does sickness come from? Well, there are a number of sources, and I want to deal with those this week. But primarily today, I'd like to suggest to you the tough truth that a lot of hurt and a lot of illness comes because of simply of sin. Because of the fall of man back in the Garden of Eden, illness came upon us. This was not God's plan. God's plan was that we would live forever, that we would live in fellowship with Him with perfection. But unfortunately, the sin of man has done this job on us. And when sin came into the world, everything changed. Death came, illness came. And as a consequence of the sin, the world has fallen into a place of hurt and of different forms of illness. Now, in this particular passage, the children of Israel had grumbled against God. I want to warn you against that. Warning against grumbling against the God who really, really loves you. And they had grumbled against Him. And He disciplined them because God does not deal well with grumbling people. God wants us to continually trust Him, and the reason that so often we're sick, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually and psychologically, is because we haven't learned how to trust God. Every little bump in the road calls us to fall apart because we haven't learned what it means to learn the lesson that the children of Israel had to learn that time was simply through the ups and downs of life. God does not change. When God says we can trust Him, people, for goodness sake, we can trust Him. And the less you trust Him, the more you open yourself to some of the physical, emotional, and spiritual ills that are out there to get you. So God would want for us to trust Him. Now in Isaiah chapter 29, verse 24, here's an interesting verse. It says this: they were murmuring, those that murmur will learn doctrine. That's an interesting passage. God is saying, if you want to murmur, I better teach you some doctrine. Now He's being gentle, He's being kind, and it's actually in this passage in Isaiah is a picture of God's love and His continual love for us and His commitment to our well-being. But at a certain stage, God says, if you will not learn, I will have to teach you doctrine. Now you know what doctrine is about. Doctrine is learning about God. Is learning that you can trust Him, learning to know that His love is complete and is total. And when you understand the love of God, then fear will leave you. And fear is the root of so much horrible illness out there. We don't understand how true it is that God is on our side. That's good doctrine. We don't understand that we can trust Him in every situation. People, that's good doctrine. We got to understand that God is able and willing and wants to heal us. But as we learn and if we want to walk in rebellion to Him, please don't go and pray for the healing of God when you're living in rebellion to Him. God says, for those who draw close to Him, He heals. That's prerequisite number one. And so for sin to come between you and God, sin has to be confessed. Even go to the New Testament and read what James says. And James says, let them call the elders of the church, let him confess his sin, and God will honor the prayer of the righteous, and that man will be healed. But at some stage, we have to get real with the issue of sin. And sin is the cause of so much ill, not just physical, although there's a lot of that out there, but your emotions, your psychology, so much is as a result of bad thinking and bad theology. So for those who grumble or do any other form of something that will upset God, then God will tell you that if you want to grumble, you need to learn some doctrine. Now, doctrine may have for many people a negative, boring connotation. It is nothing of the sort. Doctrine is great, because how can anything that's short of studying this wonderful God who is ours be anything but great? And God is saying, let's get down to some business. You need to know who I am as the source and the foundation of your healing. So today, guys, let's go and contemplate God. Think about Him when you're at work. Think about Him when you're driving the car. Think about it when you're picking up the kids. Think about it when you're facing the challenges of the day, of which there are plenty out there. For goodness sake, our country is in a bad way at the moment. There are plenty of problems, but we have a God who's far bigger than all of those things. A God who heals. That, people, is really good doctrine. So let's contemplate those things today. Have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.